Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled How Satisfied Are Healthcare Organizations with EHR Analytics? My name is Kathy Susich, and I am Director of Healthcare Marketing at Dimensional Insight, the 2020 Best-in-Class Healthcare Business Intelligence and Analytics Solution. I am joined today by Brendan Fitzgerald, Senior Director of Research for Definitive Healthcare. Thank you for being here today, Brendan.
Thank you, Kathy.
A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. If you have any questions for us during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel. We will have time for Q&A at the end and we'll address your questions then. We will also have a raffle after the Q&A for a $100 Amazon gift card. You must be present to win, so be sure to stick around for that. Now on to our topic. Over the last several years, many of the EHR vendors have come out with their own analytics solutions. We were curious as to how well these solutions are meeting healthcare organizations' needs. So Definitive Healthcare fielded a survey sponsored by Dimensional Insight that set out to ask questions about satisfaction levels with EHR analytics. We also looked at satisfaction levels with analytics-specific platforms and in-house analytics solutions so we could compare the three. The results, as you'll see soon, were very interesting and informative. Before we look at those results, Brendan, can you talk to us about how the survey was designed and the demographics of who you surveyed?
Sure, absolutely, Kathy. And again, thanks everyone for joining. So as typical for some of these engagements, our approach is very cast a wide net. So what we like to do is start off with a topic such as the analytics and EHR and analytics and how it's impacting the industry, and then hone in from there. So to do so, we conducted a blinded voice of customer quantitative study, and really, as Kathy mentioned, trying to focus on how organizations are strategically approaching analytics. And as she said, from an EHR perspective, a standalone or a specific solution perspective and an in-house solution. So our primary demographics for this were key decision makers within those healthcare organizations. We targeted an audience of about 100 or plus respondents in total number for what we wanted to accumulate in terms of responses. Those C-suite and director levels really involved with the analytic use and decision making within those organizations, so they have a feel for the nuance of the different levels of analytics we're talking about. And really from a bed size perspective, keeping in mind that many smaller organizations may not necessarily have as much access nowadays to all three proponents of analytics that we were researching, we kept our demographics at 100 plus beds for organization size. The web survey that we conducted was primarily run earlier this year. For a short period of time, roughly 4 weeks, give or take. And in total, we ended up with 108 respondents. Now, in terms of demographics, those are some of the things that we highlighted. On a higher level, we can dig into those quite a bit in the responses themselves. So we do collect titles, and as you can see, roughly 70% of those belonged in the C-suite. So had some sort of chief medical, chief nursing, chief executive, or president title with them. The rest of the titles were made up of executives or directors of the IT, clinical, financial, or administrative levels across these organizations. The types of organizations we targeted, as I mentioned, plus 100 bed size, but also we wanted to focus on those acute organizations that would have an idea as to and have implemented analytics across organizations. So short-term acute care hospitals, healthcare systems, We did find some children's hospitals in there and long-term acute care hospitals, but really from an ownership perspective, 81% belong to an IDN or a larger health system, and 19% were standalone hospitals. And within those organizations, as I mentioned, we targeted 100 plus beds, but average bed size for the most part was 809 beds. And you can see the breakdown. We'd like to get a nice mix of opinions when we do studies such as these to make sure that we're getting the entire picture of the market. So roughly a quarter of the organizations we pooled were greater than 500, and then roughly 40% for the other two in terms of bed size, 201 to 500 and 101 to 200.
Great, thanks, Brendan. Now let's take a deeper look at some of the findings. The initial set of questions focused on how organizations conduct analytics. Brendan, what did your team find here?
Great. So one of the key things we wanted to understand across these three different analytics approaches is what's being used across the board. And as you can see, we focused on the EHR analytics usage, analytics-specific platform usage, and the in-house solution. And starting with larger bed size and working our way to the right, we can see that a number of those in the chart, a number of those organizations greater than 500 beds really have a high level of usage across the EHR and analytics platforms. And that moves down to the right as we move across the smaller bed size. So as we saw, there's from an EHR analytic platform usage, there's roughly 89% use rate. And you can see the level of exclusivity or standalone usage of that tool in the quantitative assessment to the right. So 49% exclusively or primarily use EHR. Really what's interesting is the analytics specific platform usage. So roughly 62% overall use either the analytics specific platform exclusively or use it, but not as a primary tool. And roughly a third of those do not use it. So interesting findings just in terms of the level of usage and exclusivity within those. So it's very mixed. Even nowadays with data being so important, there are still different levels of not only levels, but sources of data where data can be impactful, right? But as we see, the larger the organization, the higher the likelihood of actually using additional solutions for analytics. So as we said in the line chart, as we moved from the left to the right, it slightly slopes down in terms of analytics specific platform and in-house solution. We'll take a broader look at some of these in the next slide as well. So in focusing on using analytics specific platforms, there's a certain level of advancement that comes along with being able to harness, process, and sort of make that data actionable. And as you can see, when the solution is used exclusively or primarily, it's a very, I would say, pretty good assessment in terms of the analytics use. So roughly in the 6.7 or 6.5 to 6.7 range across health records, analytics specific platform, and in-house solution. But when it's used in any manner, so what that means is, advanced use or minimal use, really what we're seeing is that analytics specific platform really has the higher rating above electronic health records and above the in-house solution. Now, I know this seems somewhat minimal, but when gauging the state of usage within analytics platforms, it's really those little differences that stand out, and you can really capitalize on or begin to understand the impact that those analytic solutions have. So that analytic specific platform really used in any manner, as we can see from this, really helps produce that higher level of analytic advancement. And as we moved on in the study, another thing we saw, and what we wanted to find out was those that weren't using an EHR analytics platform, what was the primary reason? So really, we wanted to ask the question of those not using EHR for analytics at all. And what we found really is some of the, I think some of the differences that we've seen throughout the adoption stages of healthcare IT, from the start in 2009, 2010 till now, and sort of an understanding of what those EHR solutions were primarily used for, and sort of their evolution to this point. So certainly as a medical record and logging sort of clinical interactions, those EHR platforms do very, very well. There has been advancements in terms of being able to produce the level of analytics that some organizations need, as we've seen, and organizations have relied upon that. But really, when it comes down to specific functionality, the respondents indicated that the EHR analytics platform or functionality was not robust enough. Querying was difficult, as you can imagine, trying to query some data in, say, a specific patient record or across multiple patients or a population of patients. So it's a bit cumbersome, at least according to our respondents. And the level of sort of advanced analytics that are being input and extracted from the EHR are not meeting the standards that I think the level of sophistication that some healthcare organizations have begun to achieve, right? So there still needs to be, I think, some work to do across the board from a sophistication level of organizations. But up until this point, certainly EHR solutions and functionality has met some of those needs. But what we're seeing is that there needs to be a lot more done from a functionality perspective, and we can take a look at that in the next slide. So in terms of a third-party, specific analytic platform, we wanted to understand why those organizations that weren't using them haven't taken the leap, right? Certainly there are competing priorities from a budget standpoint, and really that's one of the primary reasons where organizations have cited their hesitancy to move forward. The cost of a solution after making so much in terms of capital investment with the EHR solution, for many organizations, it just doesn't make fiscal sense at this point. Additionally, interoperability is sort of one of those larger buzzwords that we've seen in the industry lately over the last few years, and really getting a lot of systems to not only speak to each other, but eliminate data silos and really present that entire patient picture across the entire patient journey is something I think everybody strives for. So there are interoperability concerns with current EHRs and systems. So being able to pull siloed data is something that I think a lot of organizations have struggled with. I do feel it will be getting easier in the next, say, 3 to 5 years with a few implementations of a couple different solutions, but really there's a bit of a holding pattern for a lot of organizations due to these top two reasons. The other, and this really can't be overlooked, and we see this quite a bit and have seen this quite a bit over the last few years, is leadership buy-in. So in the run-up to adoption to 2020, it seemed like many organizations were or felt that technology was the answer to everything. Well, it's certainly the answer, but not necessarily to everything, right? So they've come to understand that there's certain nuance and certain solutions that need to be in place. So we've seen a bit of a shakeout in terms of number of vendors used and sort of limiting the number of solutions that are coming across or being implemented across healthcare organizations to those essential solutions. And analytics, I would consider to be one of those essential solutions. But in terms of getting leadership on board, that is seen as the third significant hurdle that organizations really have trouble moving forward with an analytics platform. So those three things: cost, interoperability concerns, and certainly leadership decision or getting leadership on board to move forward with a robust analytics plan or strategic plan are some of the top reasons for not using a third-party specific platform for analytics.
Great. Now let's dig further into some of the challenges with analytics platforms. We got a feel for this in the last couple of slides, but the survey found that different types of analytics platforms have different types of challenges. Brendan, how do they compare to each other?
Yeah, great question, Kathy. And this slide looks like a lot, but bear with me while I walk us through it. So we wanted to look at some of the greatest challenges that we've seen across the board in terms of the top three platforms, right? So analytics platforms, specifically EHR Analytics and in-house solutions. And as you can see, the EHR in the purple, we mentioned some of those top issues. Reporting and querying is difficult and slow. I think EHR solutions, as you can see, and analytics specific platforms are really sort of neck and neck in terms of robust reporting, maybe some slow in terms of querying, and then in-house solution. Obviously, I think it on some level comes down to user comfort and usability. Because we've seen with many organizations that have their sort of in-house solution, it's built from scratch. They've got a competent user that understands the data, and implementing a new solution, or at least trying to extract data from EHR solutions can be somewhat complex. But where we see other things that are sort of in difference with each other is across the next few categories. So interoperability, certainly some of the challenges there for the analytics specific platform, as we saw, rises a bit higher above the EHR and in-house solution, which really signifies a challenge for organizations to understand how a robust analytics platform can really help them at a holistic level. So those are some of the big concerns there. The component not robust or advanced enough, as we've seen, we see that in the gray line, the analytics specific platform goes from sort of a high level of interoperability challenge to one of the lowest or sharpest drops we see in the study to 9.4% in terms of solution robustness and advancement. So being able to do more with one solution is obviously a benefit of the analytics specific platform. And as you can see, the EHR and the in-house solutions sort of play right next to each other in that robustness and advanced functionality and capability. Some of the things that are improving across the board for most solutions, and specifically for advanced data analytics solutions, is that visualization. As you can see, the lack of visualization is somewhat higher for the EHR and in-house solution, and we see as we go down the line, the user interface, the cost, we see a lot of these things sort of ramp up to sort of a higher level for the challenges of the the analytics specific platform. But then we come down to the last few categories, and we see that the analytics platform really stands out above the rest in terms of current data. Real-time data is important when it comes to analytics and for organizations to make the decisions they need. Data storage, analytics solutions are becoming more flexible in terms of storage, whether it be by the cloud or incorporating into their offsite data centers. And customer service support, vendors are understanding the need for supporting these organizations and being able to support them in their solutions and their data needs. So really, these are the the challenges that advanced analytics solutions and analytics specific platforms are being able to address quite easily. But as we've seen in the last slide and in this slide, that interoperability challenge is rather high, and that cost component is rather high, both of which should come down quite significantly in the next few years, if not less, 12 to 24 months.
Thanks, Brendan. Now let's look into the different satisfaction levels with different forms of analytics. Brendan, what did the survey find in terms of which types of users are the most satisfied?
Yeah, so when we think about user satisfaction, there's that middle road that we think everybody plays in, right? It's that 5 to 7 range that when vendors look at it, they want to improve upon those specific categories and those rankings. Well, what we've seen is, from just looking at the chart itself, the analytics specific solutions really have the highest satisfaction overall. Now, the average ranking overall is 6.69 with 65 respondents using that analytics specific platform. But as you can see, it's higher in the 8 and 9 category, which is, when looking at that NPS, that Net Promoter Score, that satisfaction level, that's really where a lot of organizations like to see their product. And it's nice to see the analytics specific platform really head and shoulders above the other two in those 8 and 9 categories. Now, it's not to say it's not without some difficulty. It drops a little bit in 10. However, I think that comes down to usability from the end user perspective, and certainly, with a more complex, more robust solution, there's a learning curve. So, certainly think that even though it is a smaller percentage, 3.1, it's still above the 2.1 of the EHR health record solution analytics platform. So really what we're seeing is a solution that's from an analytics specific solution that's come through the last few years, really higher satisfaction levels across the board from an average rating, but also in those key higher level rankings is where we're really seeing the analytics solution specific platform stand out. So I think I mentioned it earlier in the presentation is users understand that they can do more with more robust functionality, more data, and make it more accurate to help better decision making. And then we'll go into the next slide and really focus on users and non-users in terms of how they feel those analytics specific platforms can add value. So in looking at this, those non-users, first let's back up. So looking at the questions, so how much value would an analytics specific platform solution have in enhancing your organization's ability to conduct and perform analytics with your EHR? So those non-users answered that first question. As you can see, they firmly believe that the average, the ability for those analytics specific solutions to be able to help them and add value to their needs is extremely high, 7.40. Current users is still very high. Those are the ones currently using their specific analytics platform and sort of gauging the value there. So we're seeing very high level of value add with both solutions. But what really stands out is those non-users who think that the solution and the analytics specific platform can really bring value to their organization. Now, this may speak to some of the challenges we saw earlier with leveraging an EHR analytics platform, right? So not as much robust functionality, some clunky querying perhaps, or even some slowness or lack of up-to-date data. So there are certain things and I think challenges that go along with that non-user rating that really speak to that analytics-specific platform and thinking it can add value to their organization. So it's really telling to see that there is not only a need, but really a desire in understanding how these solutions can add value across the board.
Thanks, Brendan. Now let's sum up some of the findings. What do you see as the key takeaways here?
Yeah, so, this was an interesting project in that we found out some things that, a few things maybe we thought we knew, but certainly some things that stood out and really helped capture what we felt was some important information to share with everybody on the call, but also just an understanding of the analytics platforms that we've seen across the industry. So as we've seen, 60% of respondents utilize an analytics specific platform, right? And as organizations increase in size, the likelihood of them to actually leverage that analytics specific platform increases as well. Analytics specific platforms have the highest level of analytic advancement that we've seen. So, and also the highest satisfaction rate on average. So, there's certainly a robustness to the solutions and a higher level of satisfaction that comes with being able to analyze data both clinically and financially across your organization. That sort of jumped out at us. Again, talking about some of the challenges using those EHR solutions as their specific analytics platform, lack of robustness from a functionality standpoint, so not advanced enough. Reporting and querying is sometimes slow and cumbersome. So these are all issues I think, on some level, EHR vendors are beginning to address. However, there's certainly a lot of catch up that needs to be done when thinking about those analytic specific solutions that are out on the market today. And certainly, as you can see from satisfaction levels and sort of the value add, they're sort of gaining market share in terms of being able to help organizations make a difference in their decision making. So again, it's not all with, it's not all roses. There are some issues and challenges with using that specific analytics platform. Cost is one, interoperability concerns, as we saw, is another. But getting leadership on board is one of those keys that is often overlooked. And once they understand that the level of robustness and functionality that comes with those platforms can actually help improve financial outcomes as well as clinical outcomes, there's certainly a cost component that can be baked into the approach that any organization, any vendor uses to sort of say that this solution will essentially pay for itself with what it can contribute to your organization, the value it can provide from a financial and clinical standpoint. And then lastly, current users and non-users of analytics specific platforms feel the value that can be created through their organization's ability to perform analytics is something that can't be overstated, right? So it's the way the market is going today, and will continue to move toward that more data-centric decision making, not only from a business sense and financial sense, but certainly on a clinical level, which is also a key component in a lot of these organizations and in these solutions. But top challenges overall with some of these analytics specific, difficulty in reporting, querying, the component, on some level not robust enough. Interoperability is one, but as I said, there should be some ways to mitigate interoperability issues in the coming years. And as we mentioned around costs, and Kathy, you may want to jump on this as well, but it's more of a challenge for analytics specific platform users. Increase of 22% of the selections, but the robustness of the advancement that we see in those analytics specific platforms is notably less of a challenge than we've seen with those EHR analytic platforms. So that was certainly a telling sort of quantifiable data point that we were able to extract from the study that we conducted.
Definitely. Thanks, Brendan. And if anyone has any questions for us, you can go ahead and type them in the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel. While you're doing that, I will quickly tell you just a few words about Dimensional Insight. At Dimensional Insight, we help our customers keep complex problems simple with our industry-leading analytics platform, Diver Platform. Diver Platform provides everything you need in one solution, and we do such a good job at serving our customers' needs that we have won Best in Class for Healthcare Business Intelligence and Analytics 7 times out of the 10 years that KLAS has offered it in this category. We are not just analytics experts, but we are also healthcare domain experts. With the experience to guide you to successful outcomes, Dimensional Insight knows healthcare and is a partner who will help you to innovate quickly. If you'd like to speak to one of our experts, please call us at 781-229-9111, email us at info@dimmins.com, or visit our website at www.healthcare.dimmins.com. All right, and we will take some questions now. When we're done, we will do a raffle for that $100 Amazon gift card. You must be present to win, so please stick around. Brandon, our first question, do you have any data on satisfaction rates broken down by EHR vendor?
Oh, that's a great question. So that is, it's a tough one to tackle. I know if we go back to, well, let's not go back in the slides, but let me talk to the slides that we saw earlier. So within, I think it was the, when we're talking about the third-party specific platform and EHR platform, certainly we highlighted some vendors. So I think in terms of satisfaction, we don't necessarily have some key demographics around that. However, what you're seeing in those vendors that we marked or noted for the EHR platform, Cerner, Allscripts, Epic, and Meditech. And then I think for the analytics specific platform, we saw those, but also some Athena Health and MedHost. So, what you're seeing is the cream of the crop in terms of EHR vendors that have, started off in the industry with back in 2007, 8, 9, and really come through and help advance not only the IT establishment in healthcare, but in providing a lot of extra functionality that comes with the EHR platform. So certainly we're seeing the best of the best in terms of EHR platforms come through. Now, this doesn't take away from the fact that there's some user dissatisfaction or need for additional functionality and more robustness across the analytics platforms that are being offered. So we don't necessarily have the satisfaction levels for these specific vendors, but as you can see, there are positives and negatives around analytics platforms for both, but a bit higher in terms of those analytics specific platforms, regardless of vendors. So I think maybe for a future study, we might be able to hone in on that and get a little more insight there. But that's probably the best I can do in terms of sort of understanding and relaying my understanding of sort of the satisfaction level across EHR vendors.
And our next question, what have you seen in terms of cloud adoption for analytics? I can tell you from the Dimensional Insight perspective, we have seen a lot more interest in the last year or so of healthcare organizations that do want to deploy analytics in the cloud. Brendan, do you have any particular insights?
Yeah, and I would back that up 100%. So with the way the industry is moving currently, and regardless of solution, but specifically focused on analytics, there has been a push toward the cloud and harnessing a more flexible infrastructure for a lot of these healthcare organizations for a couple of reasons. One, the level of data coming in is monstrous, right? Being able to manage that, house that, store that, and extract that data on their own is something that they've realized they cannot do, don't want to do, or financially don't see it in their best interest. And some of the best way to do that is through the cloud. So we've, at Definitive, we've seen an increase in the number of cloud instances that are addressing the healthcare market, which is a good thing. And certainly there are a number of different options out there now. You've got Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, VMware, a number of different applications that address some of those needs. So being able to have that flexible infrastructure in place certainly helps. And as Kathy said, even at her company, we've seen sort of the request for cloud-based applications and functionality grow over the last 2 years alone.
Great. Another question that just came in: any insights on analytics platform use in the ambulatory market? Again, from the Dimensional Insight perspective, I can tell you that there has been a lot more interest here in healthcare organizations that are looking for ambulatory analytics. Brendan, do you have anything on the Definitive side about this?
Yeah, some anecdotal, but also some that in some studies that we have done in the past, but also some projects we're currently working on. So from an ambulatory perspective, we've seen larger physician practices take on more of that analytics burden than the smaller ones, obviously. There are more, I think some, not more, but certainly some regulations that they need to consider, MACR and MIPS being two of them, in sort of addressing the needs from an ambulatory standpoint. But traditionally we've seen physician practices be a bit slower in the adoption of analytics or IT in general, and I don't see that any different now with analytics solutions. However, the value that we see in the hospital and the value that was expressed in this particular study will trickle down to the physician practices. Now, whether they're affiliated with a hospital or if they're a standalone freestanding practice, that may change the dynamic a little bit. However, clinicians, administrators, practice owners are seeing the value in being able to better predict not only better predict financial outcomes for their practice, regardless of specialty or focus. So we're certainly seeing an increased level in the use of analytics, even on a small scale, but it's certainly growing and growing quite quickly.
And Brendan, a final question that just came in: any thoughts on the associated value proposition of the data integration of EHR and telemedicine remote systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. Can you repeat that again quickly,
Sure.
Kathy?
Any thoughts on the associated value proposition of the data integration of EHR and telemedicine remote systems?
Yeah, so I think this has stood out for a few reasons, and we've at Definitive Healthcare, we've done a couple different telehealth solution studies for both inpatient and outpatient. So obviously, we're seeing a lot of value in the inpatient side, but the outpatient side is where we've seen the growth for obvious reasons, the COVID outbreak in the last, say, few months. We actually just published an infographic that did a quick study in the outpatient market, and it's available on our website. And if you need to check it out, let me know. Kathy has my information. But certainly I think on some level, the rush to implement telehealth over the last few months has not only impacted the EHR, but it's allowed or demanded that telehealth solutions be a bit more integrated from a data perspective. And again, being able to incorporate say phone calls and log that automatically, or house, say, a video checkup, as part of a file in somebody's EHR or electronic health record are key components, I think, that will stand out. Now, being able to harness that data and from a value proposition standpoint is something that I think will continue to develop. But again, those are greatly those are becoming more and more prevalent across the industry as we speak. So the outpatient market certainly is ramping up, and as we've seen, it will probably be here to stay for quite some time, especially with some of the easing of restrictions for what can be charged and what cannot be charged to insurance for an office visit. But certainly seeing some value there, and certainly we'll continue to see that value moving forward.
Great. Well, Brendan, thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. Let's quickly draw the name for our $100 Amazon gift card. And today's winner is Linda Daly. Linda, I will be in touch after the webinar about your gift. Thank you all so much for joining us today on our webinar. We do have a short 3-question survey that will appear in your web browser when you log out of the call. I would appreciate it if you take the time to fill that out. Some of you have asked about whether the presentation will be made available. We will be sending a recording link afterwards. If you would like a copy of this survey that we conducted, please fill out that survey at the end in your web browser, put in your email address, and I will directly send it to you. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.